When you look at Alex Webb's early black and white photographs from the 1970s, you can see glimpses and ideas of the impossibly intricate style he'd later develop. So many of his black and white images are beautiful. The geometry is there, the timing is sharp, the frames are carefully constructed. But nobody really knows Alex Webb for these images. When you hear his name today, you think of something completely different. Explosive colour. But back in 1975, Webb knew something nobody else did yet. He was stuck. At 23, already a Magnum nominee with real technical skill, he was making great work, but in territory that photographers had already covered before. Something fundamental wasn't working for Webb, and he even almost quit photography altogether. He needed to find his own vision, his own voice in a medium that felt increasingly crowded. He was drawn to Haiti. It captured a world that both fascinated and unsettled him, a world where life happens visibly and urgently in the streets. He had to go and see it with his own eyes, so he got on a plane to Port-au-Prince. But he still hadn't started working in colour. Yet. That first trip to Haiti doesn't just change Webb's photography, it begins his transformation. He's never experienced anything like it. The raw emotion, the life lived in the streets, the way joy and tragedy exist from moment to moment. But he keeps shooting in black and white for 3 more years. He explores the Caribbean, the US-Mexico border, all these places where life happens outside, but something's missing. And then he understands it finally. It's the colour. Searing light and intense colour seem somehow embedded in the cultures that I had begun working in, so utterly different than the grey-brown reticence of my New England background, Webb later wrote. In 1978, he switches to colour film and never looks back. Look at a classic Alex Webb image and your brain has to work to understand what you're seeing. At first glance it might look chaotic, messy, incoherent even, but when you take a closer look you can see more careful consideration. Webb shoots wide, usually 35mm or sometimes 28, which lets him pack multiple elements into a single frame. Often Webb finds a location where multiple planes of action might possibly intersect. Maybe it's a street corner where people pass by a brightly painted wall, while a doorway in the background reveals another scene entirely. Then he observes for life to organise itself. It's not static waiting though, he's forever moving, testing angles, but blending into the background. I only know how to approach a place by walking, Webb explains. For what does a street photographer do but walk and watch, and wait and talk, and then watch and wait some more, trying to remain confident that the unexpected, the unknown, or the secret heart of the known awaits just around the corner. In his images you'll sometimes see doorways framing people who are watching other people, walls dividing the frame into sections each containing its own story. Colours so intense that draw the eye and are integral to his compositions, but nothing feels totally random. This, as anyone who's ever tried street photography will know, is very, very hard to do well. To balance chaos in a frame without it falling completely apart, or without it looking too well organised. Alex has this uncanny ability to balance his frames so it almost feels like he was invisible when he took the image. The shadows do as much work as the light. Webb uses the harsh sun of tropical and border regions to create these deep blacks that become shapes themselves. A shadow isn't just absence of light in his work, it's a compositional element that divides the frame, creating mystery and adding other dimensions. Colour is very much about atmosphere and emotion and the feel of a place, Webb says, but he's not using colour decoratively. Those vibrant hues create emotional intensity, sure, but they're also working structurally. A red wall behind a figure makes that person pop forward, a blue doorway creates depth. Colour becomes as much a character in his images as the people in them. For 5 decades, Webb has worked in what he calls places of cultural and often political uncertainty, borders, islands, edges of societies, where cultures merge, sometimes clashing, sometimes fusing. Haiti, Turkey, Cuba, the US-Mexico border. Why these places? Webb doesn't work like most photojournalists. He doesn't research a story and then go and illustrate it. He walks into a place and lets it teach him what it's about. Whatever insights, socio-political, cultural or aesthetic, I may have into the societies I have photographed over the years, come not from preconception, but from the process of wandering the street, he explains. No predetermined story, just observing and exploring until the place reveals itself. But there's method in the wandering. Webb returns to the same locations repeatedly. He learns how light moves across particular walls throughout the day, he understands the rhythms of specific streets. This is what you might call one form of street photography. In fact, Webb published an entire book called La Calle, literally the street. For him, the street isn't just a location, it's where life happens without a filter, where public and private blur, where strangers interact with architecture in ways you can't predict or control. Not a typical documentary photographer or photojournalist, I've worked essentially as a street photographer, exploring the world with the camera, allowing the rhythm and the life of the street to guide and inform the work, he explains. For me, everything comes first and foremost from the street. Everything he's learned about timing, composition, colour, light, it all comes from walking the streets and watching how people move through space. My work is questioning and exploratory, he says. I believe in photographs that convey a certain level of ambiguity, that ask questions rather than provide answers. This is key to understanding his compositions. Those intricate, multi-layered images aren't trying to explain anything, they're just showing the world how it looks through his eyes, rich, textured and layered. Life doesn't happen on one plane, it happens on multiple planes simultaneously, and Webb's technique captures that reality. So just how does Alex Webb create these wonderful, complex and engaging images he's so well known for? Let's break down what makes a Webb composition actually work, because it's not just about jamming a bunch of stuff into one frame. First, there's usually a clear foreground element, often a person, sometimes just a shape or colour, that anchors your eye. Second, the middle ground contains more action and subjects. This is where the viewer has more information to read a story into the image. And third, the background reveals context, another figure, a doorway, a reflection, something that adds mystery or meaning. But crucially, so often in his work, these elements interact. The foreground element might be watching the middle ground action, or the background might mirror or contradict what's happening up front. Webb creates visual conversations between different depths in an image, usually using a deep depth of field to keep the main elements in focus so you can see the relationship between them. He also uses frames within frames constantly, a doorway containing a window containing a figure, an archway leading to a courtyard where someone crosses. These nested compositions give his work this sense of depth and discovery. There's always something to find if you keep looking. And the light. Webb has said that he's drawn to hot light, that intense shadowy sun you get in tropical and desert regions. This light creates drama but also structure. A shaft of sunlight becomes a diagonal line cutting through the frame. A shadow becomes a geometric shape that balances the composition. Webb also uses the environment as much as the humanity living in it. Walls, doorways, geometric buildings creating strong lines, shapes and depth. The result is photographs that feel spontaneous but not cluttered, organised without being too carefully designed. Webb has won pretty much every major photography award. Guggenheim Fellowship, Hasselblad Foundation Grant, Leica Medal of Excellence. His work hangs in the Met, the Whitney, the Walker Art Centre. He's published over 15 books. He's also found a creative partner in Rebecca Norris Webb, his wife and fellow photographer. Together they've made 6 collaborative books exploring places that fascinate them both. But success hasn't changed his approach. He's still out there, still observing, still looking for those moments when multiple elements align. Ultimately, the reward is the process, Webb has said. The process of photography. For Alex Webb, the switch to colour wasn't just a technical choice, it was also an emotional one. He found places that matched the intensity he felt, but couldn't express in black and white. He learned a new visual language, one built on depth and colour and sophisticated compositions, to say what he needed to say. But the bigger lesson is all about patience. We can all take 1,000 photos in an afternoon now, but Webb teaches us that meaningful images come from sustained attention. He doesn't just visit a place, he explores it until he understands its rhythms. He doesn't always snap the shutter when something interesting happens. He positions himself where interesting things are likely to happen, then waits and observes and engages, and waits some more, looking for a split second to make an exposure that might be something special, but so often comes to nothing. It's about having the patience and the belief and the willingness to practice and fail that gives him the opportunity to make those spectacular frames. Those multi-dimensional compositions each represent hours of observation. Understanding how light moves across a wall, how people use the street, how architecture creates natural frames. The possibility of one particular photographer's pictures lying around the corner is never realised until the photographer is there, Webb says. It's one of the enigmas of photography. You have to be there, not just physically, but mentally present, paying attention and anticipating. That moment in 1975 when Webb realised he was stuck, the problem wasn't his technique, it was his relationship with his subjects. He found subjects he cared about, places that moved him, light that made him feel something. Once he felt something real, he could show something real. Those sophisticated compositions, the depth, the colours, the geometric precision, they're not showing off, they're showing the world as he sees it. Life actually is this intricate, many stories happening simultaneously. Webb spent years shooting in black and white before he realised he needed colour. That's years of paying attention before understanding what his work required. Most of us would have given up or convinced ourselves that black and white was fine. But if things aren't working in our own photography, then changing something up can make all the difference. That's what Webb learned in Haiti in 1975. That's what those 5 decades of patient observation have been about. That's what those impossibly sophisticated, beautiful, ambiguous photographs are really showing us. Not chaos, but the intricate reality of being alive and really paying attention.